In the shadow of England's bloodiest civil war, where loyalty could shift overnight and crowns were won with betrayal as often as with swords, there lived a girl whose life would be shaped not by choice, but by the ruthless machinery of power. Her name was Anne Neville, and before she ever understood what it meant to be a queen, she had already been used as a pawn in a game that would destroy her family, define her fate, and ultimately erase her from history's center stage. She was born into privilege in 1456, the daughter of one of the most powerful men in England, Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, known to history as the Kingmaker. He was not just a nobleman, he was a force capable of placing kings on the throne and removing them just as quickly. But power, as Anne would learn far too young, comes at a cost. And for daughters of powerful men, that cost was often their own lives, sacrificed not in death, but in destiny. Anne's childhood unfolded against the violent backdrop of the Wars of the Roses, a dynastic struggle between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. This was not just a war, it was a prolonged storm of bloodshed, betrayal, and shifting alliances that tore England apart. In this world, children were not sheltered from politics, they were shaped by it. And Anne, from a young age, became a valuable piece on her father's political chessboard. Before she reached adulthood, Anne was promised in marriage to Edward of Westminster, the only son of Henry VI of England and Margaret of Anjou. It was not a love match. It was not even a personal decision. It was a strategic alliance, an attempt by her father to strengthen his influence after shifting his allegiance from the Yorkist King Edward IV of England to the Lancastrian cause. And so Anne Neville, a young girl, likely no more than 14, was married into a war she did not start, to a prince she barely knew, in a kingdom already on the brink of collapse. For a brief moment, she became Princess of Wales, a title filled with promise, but built on fragile ground. Because the war was far from over. In 1471, everything changed. The Lancastrian forces, desperate to reclaim control, clashed with Yorkist armies at the decisive Battle of Tewkesbury. It was here that Anne's young husband, Edward of Westminster, was killed, either in battle or executed shortly after. In a single moment, Anne became a widow, still a teenager, still a pawn, but now stripped of her role in the Lancastrian cause. Her father, the once powerful kingmaker, would soon meet his own violent end at the Battle of Barnet, fighting against the very king he had once helped to crown. Within the span of months, Anne Neville lost everything: her husband, her father, her position, and her protection. She was no longer a princess. She was a political liability. What followed was not rescue, but exploitation. Anne was taken into the household of her brother-in-law, George, Duke of Clarence, who sought to control her inheritance. As the daughter of Warwick, Anne was an heiress to immense wealth and land. But in a world where women had little agency, her fortune made her a target rather than a beneficiary. She disappeared from public view, hidden, controlled, and used as leverage in a silent power struggle between powerful men. And then, from the shadows, another figure emerged: Richard III of England, then known as Richard, Duke of Gloucester, entered her life. Unlike the others, Richard had his own reasons for seeking Anne. Some historians believe there was genuine affection between them. Others argue it was yet another calculated move to secure Warwick's vast estates. Perhaps it was both. In a world where love and power were often indistinguishable, the truth remains blurred. What is certain is this: Anne Neville would marry again, and once more, her fate would be tied to the throne. Their union was controversial. Clarence opposed it fiercely, unwilling to divide the inheritance. At one point, stories suggest Anne may have been hidden, disguised, and concealed to prevent Richard from finding her. Whether myth or truth, it reflects the desperation and intrigue surrounding her life. But Richard persisted, and in 1472, Anne Neville became Duchess of Gloucester. For the first time since her childhood, there may have been a moment, however brief, where her life seemed to stabilize. She gave birth to a son, Edward of Middleham, securing her position and offering hope for a future not defined by war. But history had other plans. In 1483, the death of Edward IV of England triggered another crisis. His young son was meant to inherit the throne. Instead, Richard seized power, becoming King Richard III. Anne Neville, the girl who had once been a pawn in her father's ambitions, was now Queen of England. But this was no fairy tale ending, because the crown she wore was surrounded by suspicion, controversy, and fear. The disappearance of the so-called princes in the Tower cast a long shadow over Richard's reign. Whispers of betrayal and murder spread across the kingdom. Trust eroded, support fractured, and Anne, once again, found herself caught in a storm she could not control. Then came the final blow. In 1484, her only son, Edward of Middleham, died suddenly. The loss was devastating, not just emotionally, but politically. Without an heir, Richard's position weakened. And for Anne, it was the loss of the one person who may have given her life meaning beyond survival. Grief consumed her. Her health began to decline. And rumors began to spread, dark whispers that Richard might seek a new marriage, even to his own niece, to secure the succession. Whether true or not, these rumors reflected a brutal reality. Even as queen, Anne Neville was still expendable. In March 1485, Anne Neville died at around 28 years old. Her death was quiet, unceremonious, overshadowed by the chaos that would soon engulf the kingdom once more. Just months later, Richard III would fall at the Battle of Bosworth Field, marking the end of the Wars of the Roses and the rise of the Tudor dynasty. And with that, Anne Neville's story faded into the margins of history, not because it lacked significance, but because it was too easily overshadowed by the men who controlled her fate. Yet when we look closer, beyond the battles, beyond the crowns, we see something far more powerful. We see a girl who never chose her path, a bride who became a widow before she became a woman, a daughter whose father's ambition cost her everything, a queen who held the highest title in the land, but never true power. Anne Neville was not just a figure in history. She was a reflection of a world where women were currency, alliances were sealed with marriages, and survival often came at the cost of identity. And perhaps that is what makes her story so haunting, because it forces us to ask, what does it mean to be powerful? When your life is never your own? Was Anne Neville merely a victim of circumstance? Or was she, in her own quiet way, a survivor of one of history's most ruthless eras? In the end, she is remembered not for what she did, but for what was done to her. A child bride, a political pawn, a queen without control, and a life shaped entirely by forces she could never escape. And now, as her story fades into the shadows of England's past, one question remains. Was Anne Neville a tragic victim of a brutal political world? Or did she find strength in simply surviving it?